Good morning, America. It's been an eventful weekend, but I want to thank you for tuning in again to Taxes Made Easy. And we're going to tackle some of the craziness from this weekend, which I think is when you think about the last time a president or a presidential candidate was shot, you have to go back 40 years to over 40 years to President Reagan when he was shot by Hinckley. So this really actually has bearing on today. How do you have success with the IRS and other governments? Things not to do, and some of the worst things that I've seen, um, and how we're still able to help people that are mad, that are frustrated. Violence is never the answer. So, especially today, it can only cause a lot more problems for you. But I think we need a lot more civility, which is going to be the topic for today. And welcome back, everybody. And I know this is a very politically charged um, environment that we're in today, to say the least. And when we come to things, and people, I mean, you can be upset with the IRS. Trust me, I'm upset with the IRS all day long. But when I call them, if I am venting my frustrations and telling them how horrible they are, and sometimes I say, hey, well, this policy is really hurting people, a lot of times they agree with me, the individual representatives, but you have to show tact, you have to show patience, and you have to be somewhat emotionally disconnected. And that's one of the main reasons that people, there's a saying, among attorneys that only a fool, someone who represents himself is a fool for a client. So if you're emotionally invested and you can't call the IRS without going off on them and cussing them out or just unloading on them, that's not productive. And the people in the IRS, they get people calling them all day long that are mad, that are angry, that are frustrated. And it doesn't help them when someone just unloads on them. They're just trying to do a job, and they're trained a certain way. They have a certain perspective that people calling in most of the time just haven't paid their taxes for one reason or another. So it absolutely helps to be civil, to go through the points and that's why if you're just too upset, and I get it, sometimes hiring someone else to represent you can make all the difference. So I'm going to jump into the news. We're going to share a lot of news from what happened. If you're not aware, this is national news. This is breaking news. And first I want to start off with a comment by Benjamin Netanyahu. So again, world leaders across the world are making comments on this. This is not only national news, but I would say world news as well. And Netanyahu, who like him or not, Israel is still a huge ally of the United States. And I'm going to just read word for word what he said, which I think is, I'm sure he said more than this, but he said, like all Israelis, my wife Sarah and I were shocked by the horrific assassination attempt on the life of President Donald Trump. He said this wasn't just an attack on Donald Trump. This was an attack on the candidate for the presidency, or on a candidate for the presidency of the United States. This was an attack on America. It was an attack on democracy. It was an attack on all the democracies. And I think this is very important to note that when, I mentioned, when talking about the Mexican election, they had 37 candidates, assassinated in this last election cycle in Mexico. That's horrible. And how many hundreds more were intimidated or forced to step down due to political violence in Mexico? And those that refused, stood by their guns, were killed. There's a reason why Mexico's politics, no offense to Mexicans, but I mean, this information is straight from the news, from conversation directly with Mexican citizens. It's a huge problem massive corruption, influenced by the cartels. And it's really tough because there's a lot of good people in Mexico that want to stand up. But in that kind of situation, it really is difficult. So again, when you have people taking guns in their hand and trying to kill people just to accomplish a political goal here, it is a threat to a democracy. It's an attack on democracy itself. And thank goodness it is rare in the United States. So, jumping to the next article, this is from just the news, and you have news articles like this all over the place. I'm not going to focus on the live feed, but again, it's if you don't know what happened, there's a failed assassination attempt. A shooter was able to crawl onto a building next to the field where Trump was speaking. And they had bleachers set up. They had a stage set up for this rally in Pennsylvania. So the shooter, Trump happened to be turning right at the right time. He claimed he was protected by God, and a lot of people think it was it was a huge coincidence that he happened to be turning his head to the right, so the bullet did not hit him in the side of the head. It grazed his ear and went through his ear, apparently, rather than killing him. So, again, this is going to have a huge impact on our government, on people. I mean, this is the last time this happened. Ronald Reagan was shot close range, and he survived. Ronald Reagan recovered from that horrific attempt on his life. And thank goodness it's not as bad as what happened to Ronald Reagan. So Trump came back and he said, when it happened, he stood up, pumped his fist in the air, and was quickly hustled off to the hospital. So just some of his comments. Thank you to everyone for your thoughts and prayers yesterday, as it was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening. He further said, we will fear not, but instead remain resilient in our faith and defiant in the face of wickedness. And this moment is more important than ever that we stand united and show our true character as Americans, remaining strong and determined and not allowing evil to win, he went on. I truly love our country. I love you all and look forward to speaking to our great nation this week from Wisconsin. That's from the RNC is coming up this week, so the Republican National Convention, Democratic Convention will be in a couple weeks. So House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke out. Kelly and I are praying for President Trump and all the attendees of the campaign rally today in Pennsylvania. We send our gratitude to the law enforcement who responded. This horrific act of political violence at a peaceful campaign rally has no place in this country and should be unanimously and forcefully condemned. And Joe Biden spoke out as well. Remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. And, he spoke with President Trump last night. I'm grateful he's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. So across the political spectrum, former presidents, Republican and Democrat, all voiced the same thing, that, again, this is a horrific act, has no place in our country, and, again, is one of the worst threats to democracy. There was one person killed. So this is Biden, again, calling for unity. So I had an article just for on Biden. So Biden's urging us to remember we're Americans first. The media and politicians, and there's been a lot of rancor. There's been a lot of lawfare used here, going after Trump for many, many things, and again, he's been ripped apart, torn apart, shredded, and so has Biden. rightly or wrongly, this has become a very divisive election cycle. But in the end, we need to remember that we need to come together as Americans. Um, so he called us to lower the temperature in politics. Things have gotten very heated, and that we must stand together in the end as Americans. And then it goes on, former fire chief was killed in the attack. And I want to kind of go on and talk about him. So, former fire chief died while using his body to shield his family from gunfire. So when the gunfire started, the very first thing he did was shield his family with his body. So former fire chief, I have a picture down here. I don't. I'll see if we can't produce a picture. I'm sure it's in this video. He served 20 years, 3 years as the chief, and as soon as this happened, he dove in front of his family to protect his wife and daughter from the assassin. So his quick decision to use his body as a shield for his wife and daughter rang true to close friends and neighbors who loved and respected him and said he was a man of conviction. He's a literal hero. He shoved his family out of the way, and he got killed for them. Said Mike Morehouse, who lived next to Comperatore for the last 8 years. He's a hero that I was happy to have as a neighbor. So 2 other people were injured, David Dutch and James Copenhagen. So, and I believe Mr. Comperatore was one of the speakers there at the rally, which is why he was up there next to Trump. And so again, very, very sad. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden also extended their deepest condolences to their family as well. He was a father. He was protecting his family from the bullets that were being fired, and he lost his life. God love him, said Biden, who added that he was praying for the full recovery of the wounded. On that note, we're coming up on a break. A little heavy today. Apologize for that. But sometimes we need to step back. We need to step back and remember what's most important in life. And really, in the end, it's not the IRS, it's not taxes. We can live a better life by having our situation, our taxes taken care of, our finances put together. But really, in the end, it's about family, which is Corey Comperatore understood that and did not hesitate to protect his family in this situation. And I think that really stands out as what we need to be thankful for, the kind of heroes and people we should be looking up to in our democracy and throughout the world. We'll be right back after this next break. Welcome back, everybody. I want to show you an actual picture of Comperatore. This is an article from Newsweek, and just kind of talking about who he was, um, a former volunteer fire chief, and he was shielding his daughter from the gunfire when he was fatally shot. So we should remember him. And it's interesting, Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, Democrat, praised him as he and called him died a hero after diving on top of his family. He dove, protected his family, took a bullet for them, and we lost a fellow Pennsylvanian last night. I spoke to Corey's wife and his two daughters. Corey was a girl dad. Corey was a firefighter. He went to church every Sunday, loved his community, loved his family. Avid supporter of the former president, was so excited to be there last night with him in the community. Corey's wife asked to share with all of you that he died a hero, and he was the best of us. May his memory be a blessing, Shapiro said. So, I think this, in times like this, should absolutely trump politics. We should look at really what truly matters. Our family, hold our family close, our safety, and the rights that we have here in this country. So again, I don't want this to be such a downer today, but it should be a stark reminder to us about what is most important in this country. So you go back to I want to share an Associated Press article about the history of presidential assassination attempts in America. There's more than you would think. The last unsuccessful attempt, but this is where Ronald Reagan was shot by Hinckley. So again, this is just kind of goes through the history. Famously, Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed in just after the Civil War by John Wilkes Booth. And our history could have turned out very differently, as President Lincoln really wanted reconciliation. He wanted to try to heal the nation after the Civil War, but with his death, instead of moving for reconciliation, again, we ended up having military occupation of the South for decades afterwards, and when that was ended, we got Jim Crow era. So again, many scars that arguably still haven't healed today, and had a massive effect. James Garfield was killed. William McKinley was shot and killed, 25th president in 1901. There was an attempt on Franklin D. Roosevelt. Harry Truman also had someone try to kill him. I'm not sure why. I don't think it was very. Then John F. Kennedy being shot, again, a huge scar on our national psyche. Anybody that was alive at the time remembers where they were when it happened, or when they heard the news that JFK was shot and killed. It's still debated today what actually happened. But again, it was a very, very traumatic event for our country. 2 assassination attempts on Gerald Ford. Ronald Reagan. So John Hinckley Jr. came up to him, shot him twice in the chest, and in the shooting, 3 other people were shot, including his press secretary, James Brady, who was partially paralyzed as a result. Hinckley was confined to a mental hospital and was just recently released in 2022. George Bush had a hand grenade thrown at him overseas, didn't explode, no one was hurt. And then it goes back to some of the presidential candidates. Robert F. Kennedy, as a presidential candidate, was killed. So again, George Wallace attempted. So it is rare that we have attempts on presidential candidates or presidents themselves, and it should be rare for the health of any functioning democracy. And here in Arizona, we actually had about 8 years ago, I think. I wasn't in Arizona at the time, but Gabby Giffords was shot, not killed, but seriously injured as she ran for re-election for Congress. And again, it happens on both sides of the aisles. It is shocking. It is something that shouldn't happen in a functioning democracy where we can make our arguments, be heard, and respect other people's right to be heard and to vote their conscience. So again, this is using violence to force political opinions really goes completely against what we stand for as a country. There is some economic news, but I think I'm just going to focus on some of the stories. I had to bring it home and talk about how this affects you personally, and especially with dealing with the IRS. So, it was very crazy when I was first starting off as a tax attorney. They had a gentleman that flew a plane, owed the IRS, didn't feel like he had any options, couldn't figure anything out, and got so frustrated with the IRS that he climbed in his small plane and flew it into an IRS building in Austin, Texas. Don't remember if he actually killed anybody but himself, but he injured quite a few people, destroyed portions of the building, and it was very crazy to know that I talked to people in that building, IRS representatives in that building, and the trauma and how it really did shake them and scare them that just working a job, which is a necessary job. Someone has to do it if we have with our current taxation system, and nobody loves the tax man. Sorry, but to have someone's place of work attacked like that by a plane that injured quite a few. There's absolute better ways to handle this rather than going and killing yourself and trying to kill others. The shooter at the Trump rally was using a rifle and trying to, he was essentially in a sniper position, and the Secret Service returned fire very, very quickly and neutralized him, which means they killed him. So again, he essentially wasn't committed suicide, but it was a death sentence for him too, which doesn't make anybody happy. One of the articles that I didn't really want to go into the family or the shooter, but they went to the home and tried to talk to the shooter's family. Of course, the news media is all over this, getting whatever drip of information they can. And the father was like, please give us peace. We need to deal with this and make sense of this. They just lost their son, and very horrific for them as well. And we need, anytime something happens like that, there's a lot of damage on both sides. A little less serious, another true story. Had someone that we helped when he didn't need a lot of help when he hired us, but he had been banned from talking to the IRS. He was very frustrated, upset, dealing with the IRS, and this is when you should have someone else talking to the IRS on your behalf. He said something to the effect of, someone ought to bomb you guys. You guys are so horrible to deal with. Don't say that. Don't say anything like that. I mean, just threats of violence or even, hey, someone should do this, really has no place. And I talk to people all day long that are so frustrated with the IRS. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to proceed. So what happened to him? He was prosecuted. He was convicted and served some time. I don't think it was a long amount of time, but for threatening to blow up a federal building or going there, pretty much, he now had a felony conviction on him. So didn't have a criminal record, but again, you can't do something like that. You can't say something like that. So again, he could talk to us. We could receive his venting, let him get it out, get it off his chest. But because he was also banned from calling the IRS, he he had to hire someone to help him out. So we helped him out. That was fine. But we've dealt with many, many people that are frustrated, that are in tears, that just, and it is very stressful dealing with the IRS. I have people, have been ready to commit suicide over dealing with the IRS and state issues. So it is, please take a step back, breathe. There is help out there. And like I've said many times, we offer free consultation. And just remember that the people on the other side of the phone, they're Americans too, just trying to do their job. And while they can be very threatening and very dangerous, I have someone right now who's in danger of losing his home. And I'm trying to drag him to the finish line so that we can get things taken care of and respond. Because if we do respond in the right way, there is relief. There are options. But sometimes fighting the IRS and cursing at them is not productive. It can really hurt you. So that's why he has someone talking to the IRS on his behalf. And it is a very complicated situation. But if you are feeling that frustration, call, get some help. One of the things I did want to focus on when you call the IRS, understanding your rights, and not only your rights, but your options is so important. My office manager teases me that I make people cry. I don't literally. Anyway, when people come in and talk to me, yeah, there's plenty of times tears are shed, but mainly because people are so stressed out. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal with the IRS. And excuse me, a lot of people believe they're going to have their homes taken, their cars taken, that they're facing jail time. And that can happen, but in extreme situations. So let me share an extreme situation, and I need to share the article real quick. So this is an extreme example of someone that collected $1.4 million in income over many years and evaded taxes. Now, what does evading taxes mean? It means he just didn't pay. He didn't file. He didn't pay his taxes for many, many years. And if it's egregious enough, it can rise to tax evasion, which is a federal crime. So he pleaded guilty Wednesday to evading taxes on $1.4 million in income. He was just a commercial fisherman, making money, working hard. And this is from 2011 to 2013, and then 17 through 21. So when you are accused of fraud or evasion, the IRS can go back quite a ways, which is why it's never worth it. If you hate the IRS, great, join the crowd. But it doesn't pay to try to avoid them, bury your head in the sand, and don't file. So essentially what he did, after each fishing trip, he was paid by check. So he was paid essentially as a 1099, and he would just go and cash his income. And what do people do when they cash their checks? It was used to fund his lifestyle. So probably some of the bad facts here, just trying to read into it a little bit, is that he probably lived a pretty nice lifestyle. Total taxes owed going on $400,000. Now, have I helped plenty of people owing $400,000? Absolutely, millions of dollars. The difference is this guy just did this for so many years, collected over the years, over $1 million, and again, just ignored the IRS, didn't pay it. One of the worst things you can do is listen to, I'll call them chuckleheads, people online claiming that taxes are illegal. They might be, who knows, but it doesn't matter because the Supreme Court has held consistently, and they're not going to hold any other way. They found that our current tax regimen is legal. And so as long as that's what the Supreme Court says, you're not going to win any argument against it, and you're going to end up going to prison. So he's going to be sentenced October 16th, faces 5 years in prison. So he'll probably go to a prison for a year or so, but now he's got a criminal record. And once you're a convicted felon, you'll be on probation for quite a few years. No fun, not something you want to deal with. So again, people that suggest that you can play around with the IRS, that you can pull one over on them. Can you sometimes? Sure. Am I ever going to advise you to do that? Absolutely not. So if you want help, but you want to hide assets, sorry, can't help you. Don't want to help you. I had a client. Only time I've had to do this, where I fired a client for trying to hide assets. And the funny thing is, the IRS knew all about the assets. It was a house, and I think I've shared this story before. It was a house. They claimed it was in a trust, so they didn't have to report it. Mistake number one. Mistake number two, they didn't want to provide proof that it was in a trust. If you claim it's in a trust, it's not yours, prove it. Once you prove it to the IRS, they have to leave it alone. Problem is, when I finally, after 6 months, got the trust documents, the trust had already ended, 4 years prior, upon the death of her father. So I told her this. I said, look, the trust has already ended. You've got so many problems with this. The IRS can go after it. So the IRS went to the home and posted a garnishment on the door for the tenants. Told the tenants, we're levying all of the rental income. You have to send it to the IRS. If you don't, you can be held responsible. So of course the tenants started sending the monthly rent directly to the IRS. But yet they still fought it. All they had to do was to disclose the asset. We could deal with it. But it got to the point where they went to a first summons and then a second summons. After a second summons, you can face arrest. So again, this is why trying to fight the IRS tooth and nail when you're obviously in the wrong, and you're not willing to listen to your attorneys, really doesn't help at all. I mean, you're only digging yourself a hole. I was talking to someone over the weekend and they had questions about, going to a hearing and this and that, and asked why was I recommending that they don't hire an attorney. I said, because I don't think you have a case. This is a losing case from the start, but I've told you that already. You're not listening to me. So if you get an opinion, be humble, try to listen to it, and let's try to ratchet down the emotions, because in the end, we're all Americans and we're trying to help you achieve the best result possible. Again, we have another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, for this last session here. Buried in the news from this weekend, from the assassination attempt, saw this and just wanted to share another story. And part of this is, just goes to the rancor and what's been happening with this election cycle. It's nuts. But from Spectrum News, and I've seen this on multiple sites, This is brand new, came out this morning, 9:57 Eastern time, so about the time this show was starting. Judge dismissed the classified documents case against Trump, saying the way it even started was unconstitutional. And again, they didn't follow the law in appointing Jack Smith, who, again, you have dozens of felony charges. The SWAT team raid Mar-a-Lago. I mean, a lot of very unprecedented things happened here. And then you had you found the confidential documents or classified documents in President Biden's garage that multiple people had open access to, including Hunter Biden, who does not have a security clearance. All of this lawfare against President Trump has only helped him in the end. So every time there's another case filed, every time you have something like this dismissed, it only vindicates him. So if you're concerned about President Trump and you don't want him to be president, all of this stuff is counterproductive. If you're a Democrat, you should be screaming at them to stop. One, it erodes our judicial system. It erodes our confidence. Half the country, the country's very divided right now. We need to jail him, or we need to elect him even more, because this is just crazy what's happening. So again, just another bit of news here. The whole case has been dropped. The Georgia case is just in complete disarray and isn't going anywhere, mainly because of prosecutorial misconduct. And then you have the New York case where he was convicted, but now they have to revisit the conviction due to the Supreme Court ruling that official acts, running for president or as president, can't be used against them. And they used a lot of that evidence in the court case. That case has a lot of flaws. That's my personal opinion, and would be probably reversed on appeal anyway. But again, the goal is to, in many people's opinions, to rough him up, make Trump look as bad as possible heading into the election. And it's had the opposite effect. And if you're a Democrat, you don't want Trump to get elected, this assassination attempt really is going to have the opposite effect. When Ronald Reagan was shot, there was a 22% jump in his approval rating. The fact that he bounced back up, pumped his fist in the air. This is, again, this is not how we want elections to be decided. More and more, it's about personalities. We're talking about Biden's mental ability, Donald Trump. He's crazy, he's mad. But we're not talking about the issues. And I think that's the frustrating thing for me, is that we're not talking about what they would actually do as political candidates. And that's why I've tried to focus on their tax plans, what they have, what their goals are for the economy. How is that going to affect you as individual taxpayers and citizens of this country? So I do want to share some good news as we go through this. Funny story. We were talking about how people don't like the IRS. I was in Vegas and went to a show with some friends of mine. There's a comedy act, and this guy, it was a smaller show, so maybe 50 people in the room, 50, 60. And he was funny. I enjoyed the show. He did some magic tricks, but he was using a lot of sarcasm and asking for different volunteers. And of course, me being the outspoken guy that I am, I raised my hand. I wanted to volunteer. I want to be part of the fun. And I usually do. And so he called on me. And so the other people that he called on, one guy was an accountant, and he messed with her, who he worked with, blah, 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 as he did the show and used her in the trick, and et cetera. And so he used me in the trick, and it was funny. It was good. And then he asked, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a tax attorney. And he stopped and he looked at me with a serious look and he said, do you work for the people or for the IRS? I said, for the people. And he's like, he's one of the good ones. And then he left me alone. I was open to some ribbing, to some joking around. It's not a thing. He said, he's one of the good ones, and completely left me alone. Didn't mess with me at all. And I laughed at it, but at the same time, I was a little disappointed. I'm like, yeah, I can take some ribbon. But the IRS does serve a valid purpose. And when the current, I rail on the current administration a lot because they're making it so much harder for average taxpayers to deal with them. But when you talk to the people, and again, when you can get through, I talked to someone last night where they got through to someone, and they got two or three people that were horrible and wouldn't help them out, made things harder for them, and finally got a hold of someone that had been there, had experience, and they were sweet, they were understanding, and they helped them out in a massive way. And she's like, can I get your direct number? Which they won't allow, but there are plenty of good people there that understand what people are going through and do want to help people out. And I think that's where we need to kind of take a step back, realize we're Americans first. We're here to help people out. And if you can, sometimes people want help, and this is what I see all the time, but they don't understand how to go about it. And the IRS has check boxes, certain things that they need to have to be able to move a case forward. And once we check those off, I'm like, okay, now we can push for a resolution. Now you're ready to get your case taken care of. And this is something we deal with every single day, so we're very familiar with. But a lot of times people are claiming for relief. I can't pay my bills, my wages are garnished. I'm like, okay, well, we need to do A, B, and C first. We can do those quickly if we move on it. But that allows the IRS to say, okay, we're going to give you relief. And it's usually not explained very well. And when you have all those emotions and frustrations, a lot of times you're not listening, you're venting. And that's a hard thing to do when you're frustrated, and sometimes it can help to tell them the situation. But there's a difference between sharing your situation and yelling at the IRS and dumping on them and just telling them how horrible they are as people working for the IRS. That does not win a lot of friends. So there's plenty of times I've had someone that was really tough at the IRS, and then I share some of their personal stories, because personal stories do matter. There's still people on the other end. But I do it in a way where I'm not accusing them, I'm not blaming them, I just say, hey, this is their situation, this is what they're struggling with. And when you make it real for people, it's much harder for them to, the average person. And there's times where some people don't deserve a break. And there's plenty of times I call in and I try to, sing a sob story. And lo and behold, they took out 100, blew it last year or something like that. So again, the facts of the case do matter. But even if you've done something like that, there's almost always some way to resolve a case and find some kind of relief. You might not like it. It might not be pretty, but it's better than having us come after you. It's better than getting hit with all the nasty penalties and interest. I do want to jump into focusing on being Americans first. And having served in the military, this one kind of strikes home for me. Just want to make sure I get the right one. There we go. Now, I've seen this article before. And it's a great picture. The story behind it is even better. And so he says, this guy, right here in the picture with his thumb up, named John, has been coming into my work for years. I told him I was going to Vietnam next week with my girlfriend. He told me he was over there during the fall of Saigon. Very crazy time. And helped orphan babies get on evacuation planes and helicopters as a Marine. I told him I was one of those babies. He looked at me and his eyes started to well up and said he might have held me in his arms during the rescue mission, Operation Baby Lift. We talked for a while and I thanked him dearly for his service and kindness. In the end, he told me he'll sleep better tonight, knowing that a small innocent baby is now grown up with a better life in America. What an amazing young man you are, John, and thank you again for your service. I am no longer an orphan. So again, pretty powerful story. Thanking a service member for being out there, helping people. And Vietnam was not pretty. War is not pretty. But every now and then we get to stand up as Americans and really do right by somebody. And that's powerful. So here at Guardian Tax Law, we're not perfect. But again, when you need help, when you need advice, we'll give it to you. And we strive to do right by the clients. And sometimes it's not us. And if it's not us, that's going to be the best fit for you. We refer you out. So when you're calling around, when you're looking for help, it's important that you find someone that's going to do right by you. And that's going to sit there and negotiate with the IRS and help the IRS see that they should be doing right by you as well. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything you want, but to go through it and see your options, see what you can do. And when you present it in a calm, cool manner, you're going to get a lot more from the IRS. Again, they're hard enough to deal with, but when you can actually talk to someone, when you can actually get through to someone, it can make all the difference in communication and making sure that you and your family are taken care of, that your case is addressed, and that you don't have to worry about IRS garnishments and collections, which happen, and they're accelerating today. We have more audits now than ever, and it's just very scary how the last couple of days I shared how the IRS was actually has been targeting for more than 50% of the audits. Have been targeting people making $25,000 or less. Why? Because they can't really afford to fight the IRS, even though they deserve it. So there are plenty of free legal clinics out there. There are plenty of attorneys that will take on pro bono cases. We take on some. Again, we just need to be able to afford our bills, which is why we can't handle every case that comes through our door. But if we actually have someone that handles cases for less than $10,000, if you have a low dollar case, give us a call. We'll refer you on and try to make sure that you get helped out. And so our phone number again is 520-485-7371. All of these shows are posted to our YouTube channel. If you don't catch them live, or you want to rewatch something, say, hey, that piqued my interest. How do I rewatch this? How do I access the news articles that I'm sharing? All the links are shared on our YouTube channel. And I think it takes about 4 to 5 days for these shows to all be posted. They get cleaned up and made to look pretty. And they get posted to our YouTube channel as well, which you can access directly through our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. And if you still have questions, you can Google any of these topics. You're going to get a plethora of answers. Avoid the ones that are call us now and don't give you a lot of information. But there are a lot of law firms out there and professionals that do write articles, that have made blog posts about these topics, not only our firm but others, and read a few of them, get informed, and when you call someone, they should be helping you. And again, that's our whole goal as attorneys, is to be a counselor. And we absolutely counsel people when it comes to taxes. In my very first job as a prosecutor, one of the bailiffs would always refer to us as counselors. And here I was, a young 30-year-old guy, and being called a counselor was kind of like, okay. It's a little heavy, and he stopped. He's like, well, and I asked him once, why did he call us that? He said, I call all of them, especially the newer prosecutors, that, so that you remember that you're not here just as a prosecutor. You're here as a counselor and to help people through the process. I've always remembered that. And as a professional and officer of the law, as an attorney, that is our job, to help people navigate and understand our government and how to get the best results for you and your family. And a good part of that is counseling with people, letting them cry, letting them vent their frustrations, and then formulating a plan and giving them a light at the end of the tunnel. And there almost always is a light at the end of the tunnel, and options for people to resolve their taxes, breathe easy again, sleep again at night, and find peace of mind for you and your family. So if you're stressed out and don't know what to do, give us a call. Find that peace and get the help that you and your family need. Have a great day, and we'll talk tomorrow.